Hi, I'm Toby Behrmann, and I'm talking today to Thomas Loridan from Reask. Tom is the co-founder of the company and also is their risk modeling lead and developer. Tom, the last time we met was, well, gosh, it was a long time ago, I think, the first time. Was it 3 years ago in London? And we were talking about you were very much in early days of Reask. So it'd be great to sort of get a sort of catch up of sort of why you decided to form Reask and where you are at the moment.
Yeah, sure. Now you were probably one of the very first person we met actually in that trip to London. Um, we started React pretty much 3 years to the day. And what we like to define ourselves as is around the idea of a climate tech startup. So by this, what we mean is that essentially we use technology in the form of mainly machine learning and high performance computing to provide analytics around natural disasters. So climate-related disasters, we don't do earthquake and things like this, but anything that is climate-induced, we aim to do. At the current time, we very much focus on tropical cyclones. And that means that we have some products in the market that are used in different ways, I guess. You guys would have some idea of how you've been using that.
No, exactly. What I find very interesting is your use of machine learning in tropical cyclone modeling. What was the is this a very new idea, or are there other organizations doing it, or what sort of drew you to these technologies?
Yeah, I think it came along. So I've been in cat modeling space for quite a while now. Couple of years at RMS, and then I was in another smaller company here in Australia. And along that time, I met some people that were very much into machine learning here in Australia. And we did an initial study around tropical cyclone wind field. And during that collaboration, we had a lot of ideas about what else we could do, and that's how we started Reask. And really, we see machine learning as extremely useful for two reasons. One of them is probably what you think about is that it can help in a way build smarter models. So maybe models that are a bit better at capturing the physics we want from tropical cyclones, or that are better at capturing connection with the climate and things like this. But what we found is what's really useful is the ability to make the whole process more scalable. And that's where we saw a lot of value. So thanks to machine learning, we can pretty much automate the whole model building process. And that's what we decided to do with Reask, is instead of building tropical cyclone models region by region, we very much decided to do the whole globe at once. And I don't think we could have done that without machine learning, or it would have taken a lot longer. So yeah, for us, machine learning has been a way to automate, a way to scale. And our ambition with Reask is going to be constantly building global models, global coverage from the get-go.
Now, I think that's what first sort of, when you first mentioned that when we first met, it fit very closely to the mandate of Global Parametrics. So we're trying to do parametrics globally. And it's great to have models in maybe one or two countries, but it doesn't really help you scale. And to have them in many countries and be able to build them very, very quickly is, I think, is very exciting, especially with the protection gap, and that there's a lot of areas of the world which don't have this kind of coverage. So to enable this coverage with these models that you can build very quickly is, I think, really, really phenomenal. So on our side, that's why we thought Reask was such a great partnership. But on your side, have you seen sort of a big take up of these global models, and which kind of organizations are using them, and where do you see the sort of the future of this?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, because I suppose at the beginning we had this ambition to build the full catastrophe model, which would include the vulnerability, the losses, and so on. But as we got going and we started providing solution around hazards, we found quite a lot of people are ready to use the hazard on its own. But you guys have been a fantastic partnership. People in the ILS space, such as 12 Capital has been a good partner of ours. And yeah, even big insurers that are sophisticated enough to consume that data, I've found a lot of value in having a global hazard solution on its own without necessarily having to build the rest of the components. So I think, obviously, we like the parametric space for that particular reason. And I think we're very keen to keep going in that direction for a while, which is building other perils in the same ambition of global connection and global coverage, rather than go down the route of building vulnerability and loss models. Actually, where have you guys really? I know I've seen a lot about the risk in Nicaragua, for instance. I've seen a few other places popping up, but what's been the focus in the past year?
So for us, on tropical cyclones, we initially been looking at sort of Mexico and that region around there, because we found that there's a lot of need for products, tropical cyclone products, especially with Delta, which came through at sort of the end of last year. But there has been very little capacity, mainly because most of it was provided in the indemnity space. So providing parametric products which are linked to hazard, there's a lot of interest for them. And we actually recently did a program we're covering the Mesoamerican reef, where there's no way you can value a reef, but you can provide a parametric solution around that. And it's that which gave us the impetus to start spreading to other areas as well, which is why we really accelerated our partnership with you guys, because this idea that these same solutions are needed in many places where, as you say, no one's really been building very strong loss models, or there has never been an impetus for that, but there's still a need for that kind of coverage. So we're looking now at around the African coast, Mozambique, who suffer on that side, and then the Philippines is obviously a big one, and then moving over to Indonesia. So those are the areas that we're currently looking at.
Yeah, Mozambique is a perfect example where, we barely know what happened in history. I don't think anyone really has put any effort in building models over there. So yes, this is exactly where we want to focus and help.
Exactly. And this is one of these key things is the fact that you can rapidly build these models, and so you can expand very fast, enables you to you can test quickly, and you can talk to clients, and you can show clients potential solutions much more rapidly than traditionally, where people have to go and spend many millions of dollars building very country specific models, which then potentially the clients don't see value to or find too expensive. And I think this will give a lot of solutions to much lower levels of organizations who can actually really push these solutions through, which in my view is a way of helping to close the protection gap on that side. But for the future of tropical cyclone modeling, where do you see that going? Do you see it just as a continuation of the techniques you're doing, or do you think there's anything else on the horizon?
Yeah, I think there are quite a few things we're excited about. And I think it's, up till now, we've very much been focused on having one view of tropical cyclone risk, which is representative of what you'd call your current climate. We are quite interested in really digging into climate variability. So it could be down the lines of looking at seasonal trend. We know things at the beginning of a season or during spring around cycles such as the El Nino Southern Oscillation cycle and things like this. And that can help you refine your view of risk. It doesn't have to be that every year you have the exact same view of what risk looks like. We know that it changes, and I think there's a lot of work that what we've been doing, but others are doing, and I think this is going to be a big thing, is that being able to adjust that view of risk by season, and then looking at warming climates. So what does it look like for the next decade, and so on.
Are you seeing trends already, or is this the work that you haven't yet started?
No, we've done quite a lot of work with 12 Capital. So the work with them has focused on seasonal trends, but also on the idea of a warming climate. And yes, we focused on the North Atlantic only over there. That was not a global project. But yes, for the North Atlantic, what we found is sort of a two-level analysis. If we look back at the recent activity, we kind of feel that we've been unlucky in a way. So that's sort of probably a bit more activity that you'd expect if you were to repeat that period many, many times. However, we think that level of activity is what we're going into now. So it's sort of the new norm. And that's where we look at things at shorter time scale, let's say. So your risk is not the same every year, and looking at the last 50 years is not the right way to look at your risk. we're at the beginning of that journey. But yeah, this is what we want to push.
Yeah, no, because I was just reading in the papers today, they're thinking in the States of moving the hurricane season forward 1 month because they're already seeing this sort of climate variability. So it's interesting that you're sort of working on this, and as you say, this idea of looking at the last 50 years or however to assess your risk is changing all the time now because of the intricacies of climate change. So that's interesting. I was on sort of had a conversation recently with someone else from a flood agency. He was saying one of the big changes isn't necessarily climate change is a driver, but also the sort of people moving into more areas at risk, so that the actual exposure is increasing as well. Are you seeing that too in the work you're doing?
Yeah, well, it's kind of the worry is this, well, for flood and surge, they have been pointing at the east coast of the US as an area of worry for a little while. But our study on wind, and actually what's been published in academic papers in the last few years, suggests it's also the region that will be more impacted. One of the reasons for this is that the east coast of the US up till now is sort of naturally protected by a barrier of wind shear. So wind shear is a structure of the atmosphere that sort of destroys hurricanes, or at least doesn't let them intensify. And the east coast tends to have benefit from it. What's projected from some of those climate models is that this protection barrier will weaken, and therefore the east coast is again a region where risk should increase. So yes, I think where people live, whether it is for flood, surge, and sea level rise, or this phenomena, yeah, it is quite a worry.
No, I think, and where we're seeing it in the States, I think we're also seeing it in other countries as well, especially places that we work in. That looking at in the Philippines, where there's the severity of these cyclones coming through. There are always loads of cyclones coming through every year anyway, but now a lot of them maybe are not being stopped, and as you say, the same wind shear issue. So it is a challenge, and as populations increase and as people move to areas which are more at risk, I think the need for these solutions is going to become more and more important, both on the insurance protection afterwards, but also this idea of resilience before, of actually protecting yourself before. So do you see that so tropical cyclone modeling and other kind of risk modeling moving more to this idea of resilience, of sort of forecasting? And have you ever done any efforts into forecasting products?
Yeah, I'm actually, I might return the question at this stage, because I know from some of your colleagues, I've heard you guys had a solution around prepayments, and I think it was in the Philippines, right? And I think this is something I was really, really interested by, and I think we'd like to help eventually on this particular prospect. But maybe you can clarify a little bit what you guys do on this.
Oh, yeah, that's great. So we have a program that we've sort of partnered with both Oxfam and Plan International. We call it Be Ready, and the idea is that you're trying to sort of preempt the problems caused when a tropical cyclone or any kind of natural catastrophe hits an area or hits a vulnerable population. And often what happens is that people need quick access to quick money, so they can either evacuate or they can sort of sort themselves out prior to an event happening. And traditionally what happens is humanitarian aid comes a lot later, and it can also often go to the wrong people. And then the money people have as pre-resilience is being used for other things. So the point of the Be Ready program is to get cash to the most vulnerable people quickly, either a few days before something happens or at the point of something happening, so they can use that money to build their own personal resilience. And we have a tropical cyclone program running at the moment as a pilot in an area called Salcedo, Eastern Samar, but we're planning to expand that throughout to more areas of the Philippines, and eventually throughout the Philippines. We're also doing a flood program in Indonesia, and are going to launch a flood program in the Sudan as well. So the idea is that these quick onset events, and flood and tropical cyclone are the best examples for those, but also earthquake. But earthquake you can't predict, to enable that quick movement of capital to people. And I think one of the key reasons, again, why we've decided to partner with Reask is this idea that you're also working on the idea of forecasting. And if we can use these forecasts everywhere, and that we can roll out forecasts quickly, then we can really expand this program globally. And that's sort of something which we're quite excited about.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the thing I had heard from your colleague, and I was quite intrigued by it, because in that particular case, what you need is a trigger that is based on the forecast, right? And with this comes a lot of complication for the forecast agency or whatever modeling agency does the work. What we've been trying to do in that space, whether it is for that application you're talking about, which is a couple of days before landfall, maybe, I suppose this is how it works, or what we do just at landfall, is to accept that there's no way you can produce proper deterministic forecast. There's no one single truth. And therefore, we build a probabilistic view in the same way we build catastrophe models. So we do 100 versions, 100 forecasts, either a couple of days before, or even just at landfall, we do 100 versions of the landfall, so that we account for the uncertainty and completely admit that not everything is known, especially in the Philippines compared to the US and so on. And from that, we derive a probabilistic view. And we're able to give a sort of snapshot of the wind field at the surface at 1 kilometer resolution. And we do that, yes, either days before or just at landfall. And I think this has been quite popular this year, where we delivered that to all subscribers. And we obviously, given the amount of activity in the US, we've had a lot of ways to test and evaluate. And I think that the results were really good. So we'll be rolling this out again in the new season.
No, I think that's very exciting. And I was actually talking to someone else who was involved in this sort of space, and said one of the key problems with tropical cyclones is that people don't believe how severe they're going to be, so they don't take the proper precautions when the cyclone comes through. So the idea that if you can actually create something where people get paid money quickly, they see the money coming into their account, they realize actually we're being paid something. This gives them an impetus to do something about it. I think we'll have a huge improvement, not only in the developing world and on the humanitarian side that the Global Parametrics works in, but also in the US and in other sectors, where you can actually start what they call nudging people's behavior to actually do something about events, and therefore reducing their eventual losses or risk. So on my side, that's something that I'm very passionate about. So it's great that you guys are working on the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's a very good match. Yeah.
Fantastic. Anyway, Thomas, I don't want to take up too much of your time. Thanks very much for spending sort of half an hour chatting to me, and I look forward to carrying on our relationship together.
So do I. No, thanks a lot for your time, Toby.